Good day, students. Welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO students. My name remains Daniel Aroradi. I'll be teaching you literature, and we want to look at a very interesting poem today titled Binsey Poplars by Gerald Manley Hopkins.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
Hopkins wrote Binsey Poplars in 1879 in response to the indiscriminate felling of a double row of aspen trees during the Industrial Revolution in swathes of the countryside, where a lot of trees were destroyed and for the sake of industrialization. What you stand to learn, first of all, you'll be able to present to us the background of this poem. You'll be able to understand the themes in the poem, and you'll be able to explain the figures of speech that has been used in this poem as we continue. All right, let's move on to the poem itself. I'd like you to follow me as I read. My aspens there, whose hairy cages quelled or quenched in leaves the leaping sun, all failed, all failed, of a fresh and following folded rank, not spared, not one, that dandled is sandaled, shadows that swam or sank, on meadow and river, and wind wandering, weed winding bank. Oh, if we but know what we do, when we hewn or delve, hack and rack the growing green, since country is so tender to touch, her being so slender that like a slick and seeing ball, a prick will make no eye at all. Where we mean to mend are, we ender. When we hew or delve, after comers cannot guess the beauty being 10 or 12, only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc on self, the sweet especial sin. Rural sin is sweet especial rural sin. I'd like to go back to the very beginning of the poem. Looking at the picture on the screen, you see beautiful rows of trees standing with bright, beautiful flowers. This tells you how beautiful nature can be when the trees are in place and untouched, and when the trees are not yet felled. The poet persona is really obsessed with the beauty of nature. So at the beginning of the poem, he calls these trees his dear. He says, my aspens dear. This shows that the trees are so dear to him. And then he continues to describe the beauty of these trees when they are arranged in rows. Okay. He continued by describing how the sun leaps and shines on the trees and creates shadows, especially those that dance on the sea or the river. So he says those shadows swim or sink in the riverside. They continue to swim or sink in the riverside. These shadows are created by the sun shining upon the airy cages of its leaf. This is a very beautiful imagery trying to portray the beauty of nature. All right. Now, the poet switches quickly into another mood and a tone of despair. He says, but now all are quelled, all are failed. Those are words that he used to express the mindless devaluation of nature in the act of cutting and felling the trees. The poet persona is obviously not happy. In concluding the first stanza of the poem, the poet persona expressed his sadness for the way the trees are felled without even pity. They are all felled. No one of those trees were spared. So he says, not spared, not one. Not one of these beautiful trees that dandles, that sways, and are arranged like a fresh following rank. The word rank there was used to express the way the trees are arranged like the hierarchy of soldiers. And it tries also to create an image on our minds, an image of the beauty of nature. Now, after he had expressed how pained he was from the felling of the trees, he goes ahead to compare the aspen's trees to something else. In the second stanza, he gives us an allusion, and he says, oh, if we but knew what we do. This is an allusion to the statement of martyrs in the scripture or in the Bible when they do things out of poor judgment and they do not even care to investigate before they do those evil or bad things. Examples are like Stephen in the Bible, Jesus, and we're saying that they do not even know what they are doing. The same way, Gerald Manley Hopkins tries to show us that those who are involved in this practice of felling of trees are people who do not know what they are doing. They are ignorant men. So he says, oh, if we but know what we do. When we delve or hew, when we hack and rack. The use of hack and rack there is a consonance and of course an assonance also, used to explain the sounds that comes from cutting down the trees and of course the cutting of the trees itself. Now, he compares the felling of the trees to the eyes. The eyes he refers to as slick and seeing ball. And he said, when we hack and rack, the seeing balls are just as fragile as the trees themselves. So hacking the trees is more or less like getting a pin and pricking the eyeball. And you know what happens when something pricks the eyeball? A man goes blind. And one of the things that happen when a man is blind is that he cannot even see what has happened before or what is happening presently. So this is what Gerald Manley Hopkins tries to paint. He tries to show us that the aspen's tree are so fragile and so tender, just like the eyeballs. And we should not hack or cut down the trees indiscriminately. More so, he goes ahead to compare the tree to a woman. And he says, we know that the country is so slender and so tender. The same way the aspen's trees are very tender. He says, when we try to mend her, we end her. Well, the word mend there could mean a kind of industrialization or civilization. Trying to make beautiful cities, removal of trees in replacement, and replace them with banks or big buildings and institutions. Those are elements of revolution and civilization. But Gerald Manley Hopkins is not happy with this, because he thinks that the aspen trees should not have been cut down or should not have been removed. Deforestation. Now, he goes ahead to mention one of the problems and one of the evil effects of mindless deforestation. He says, after comers cannot behold the beauty being. Trees, like the aspen trees, should have been meant for conservation of natural resources and wildlife. But because of the mindless felling of these trees, there is nothing for the next generation, whom he referred to as the aftercomers, to see. They don't have any pictures. They don't even have memory of whatever was in existence in that position. And so he goes ahead and he says that all that is needed to pull down the tree, just like the woman that is so slender and so tender, is just a few cuts, a few axes, a few racks thrown at the tree, and then the tree falls. And the sweet rural scene is totally removed. Let's look at some of the themes that we can find in this poem. The first is deforestation. Deforestation. Of course, cutting of trees is what we refer to as deforestation. The next is the beauty of nature, which I have explained in how Gerald Manley Hopkins has portrayed the aspen tree. He says that they are like a following folded rank. That's an alliteration. Following and folded. They are very uniform and in order. And then the trees has very big leaves that flutters in the breeze. He says he calls them airy cages. And it also shows us how the trees extends its impact to the river, and says that the shadow of the trees dances on the river. When he says they are like the dandle a sandal, a daddle a sandal. That's the use of sprung rhythm by Gerald Manley Hopkins. Sprung rhythms appear when there are repetitions of same musical notes or sounds within the line of a poem. Now, the next we see is ignorance. When Gerald Manley Hopkins says, "Oh, if we but knew what we do when we hewn or delve," he was saying that we do not really understand what we do when we cut down trees. So we are ignorant of the benefits of these trees. Another thing we have here is the cost of civilization and industrial revolution. Every industrial revolution or civilization comes with a price. One of the prices we have to pay is the felling of trees. We can't see the beauty of those trees any longer. Those trees cannot even give us oxygen as we have believed trees to do. At another point, we find that the airy cages, since it provides shade for people, can no longer provide shade for people who love to take cool evening breeze any longer. And finally, we also have the value of forest reserves and the conservation of wildlife. Of course, we see in the criticism of the removal of trees and the absence of anything for the aftercomers to behold. They cannot even have anything to see, look at, or watch. Okay, so it's important for us to also consider the poetic devices used by the poet. The first, we have alliteration. Alliteration. What's an alliteration? Alliteration is the repetition of same consonant sounds at the beginning of words in a line of poetry. This repetition of same consonant sounds. Now let's look at the first one here. We have wind wandering. We have a repetition of we have W and we have another W. Repetition of this consonant sound, and continuing here we have W and W. Repetition of the same consonant sound at the initial level of words or at the beginning of words is what we refer to as alliteration. And we have quite a number of them here. It says wind wandering, wind winding. This gives us an imagery of how the trees move and blows when the wind comes against it. Then we have another. We have not and another not. Repetition of the same consonant sound. And then we have repetition of another consonant sound k in quelled and quenched. The sound k is used here. Has been repeated. We also have and continues even to folded. It's a felled, fresh, following, folded. We also have another alliteration. We have the alliteration in so and slender. We also have it in growing and green. Growing, green. Okay? We have other examples. I mentioned assonance the other time. We have assonance in ak and rak. Repetition of the sound ah. You know, when assonance is achieved when a vowel sound is repeated in between words in a line of poetry. Okay, then we also have the use of imagery. We have tactile imagery. How? Tactile imagery is the use of words to create a feeling, you know, an image of feeling in the reader. When the tree is cut, the poet persona expressed and said, when we hewn or delve, it's just like we prick the eye, and the eye is so fragile. Now, this creates a feeling because the eye is directly a part of the body, and this creates a sense of a kind of itching or pricking in the eyeballs. So we have that feeling by the use of the word prick, the eyeball. Then we also have a good number of visual imageries where we can see the arrangement of the aspen trees, we can see the river, we can see the felling of the tree, and those are images created in our mind. They are visual, we can see them. And of course, we also have kinetic imagery, the movement. It described the fluttering of the trees when the breeze comes against it. It describes it by saying it dandles a sandal. The word dandle there creates a sense or a sensory picture of movement. For instance, when a baby cries and you want to bring him to stop crying, and then you place him on your laps and you continue to swing and swing. That's a dandle. You call it dandling. So that sense of movement is created in the mind of the reader or of whoever is reading the poem, and that can be referred to as a kinetic imagery, the sense of movement. Okay, and then we also have allusions, like I expressed earlier, where we have issues of people not knowing what they do, and that is, of course, to draw on the theme of ignorance, the ignorant act of felling of the trees. We also have onomatopoeia, the use of arc and rack. We also have the use of metonymy. Don't forget that metonymy is a figure of association, and instead of saying trees, it says green, because green represents pasture and plantations generally. So green has been used to replace trees. So that's a metonymy. All right. So thank you for listening. I would love us to try out a question. And here's the question. Okay. So, here's the question. Examine the use of poetic devices in the poem Binsey Poplars by Gerald Manley Hopkins. In this case, you're simply to identify the central themes in your first paragraph, explain what the poem is about, tell us the themes related to the question. Then you move on to pick these devices one after the other, just as we have discussed in the class. Then make sure that you have examples from the poem, quotations or echoes from the poem to explain each of the device after you have defined each device. So if you're talking about onomatopoeia, make sure that you define an onomatopoeia, then you give us an example of an onomatopoeia in the poem. That's your first paragraph. You go to the next paragraph, you give us another example of device used, give us illustrations from the poem, and then try to explain why it was even used, just the way I have done. Please try to practice this question in your textbook or assignment book, and be sure that you finish it all on your own. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions or comments, please, you can reach us on our social media handles displayed right on the screen. Thank you very much.
Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.